Hey guys, Lee here again. And I was on the fence if I should record this video or not because it talks about my personal story, my struggle, and success. So I was on the fence about this as I'm a private person and I don't like sharing too much about myself. But I thought, what the heck, let's do it because you guys might benefit from it, and really this is where everything comes from the heart. So here goes. When I was in college, I wanted nothing but to be rich. So that's how I got started in my own business as brokering promissory notes and receivables in the secondary market in '96. So I used the internet to market that business. I had a $10,000 investment from my father, which should have been plenty to make serious bank. But unfortunately, I blew it all mainly because I didn't really know what I was doing. It was it was a massive failure. As I left college and got a real job in the real world, I still wanted to be rich, but the business sort of took a back seat to my career. Although any spare time I had was spent with learning marketing and anything online. So when my son was born, I quit my job in the mortgage business. This was about in 2001, and we didn't have any money, so we moved into my mom's basement. Um, and let me tell you guys, this is truly rock bottom for me. So to start making a little bit of cash, I delivered newspapers. So hence my moniker of Paperboy, if you've seen anything that I do. So basically, I had to get up at 3 a.m. every day, including weekends and holidays, any type of weather. It was an income, but I had to get another job, and there was no way I was going to go back to the mortgage industry. So my real expertise was in computers. So I was able to land a job in the IT industry, and the pay was decent, but it wasn't enough to get us out of my mother's basement. So I kept the newspaper job and ended up working two jobs for about another 2 years to save some money to buy a house. So all the while I was learning marketing to try to make more money than I was making with the newspaper, so I could quit that job. It wasn't about getting rich anymore. I just wanted a normal life. So one morning while delivering newspapers, I was actually carjacked. So yeah, that's right. I was forced out of my car, and my car was stolen. In the end, everything was fine, but it was a real turning point in my life. I was really desperate, and something had to change. So within a year or so of that carjacking, we managed to have enough money to buy a house. So we left the Washington D.C. area, which was too expensive to live in, and we ended up moving to Atlanta, where the cost of living is lower and the weather's better. So, but I still wanted to achieve that financial independence, so I continued my marketing education. So, I tried everything. I learned HTML, SEO, blogging, everything, even up to and including Black Hat. So, but this is interesting. So what happened next changed my life forever. So one time I was a fan of the TV show The Apprentice, especially when it first started. So in the second season, the winner was a former Army Ranger. His name was Kelly Purdue. So one day in 2005, I was browsing one of my favorite sites, which was WashingtonPost.com. So back then, the Post had a feature where they would host an interactive online chat daily with people like experts, dignitaries, celebrities, other people like that. So there's one chat that featured Kelly Purdue. So during this chat, I actually asked him what happens after his year with Trump was over, and whether he stays with Trump or moves on. Um, so he answered that when his year is close to finish, they'll evaluate his performance over the past year and see if it makes sense to continue. So nothing really earth-shattering, but the aura of just Donald Trump and the success was just really magnetic, and I felt just incredibly motivated to find my own success. So right around that same time, I was also into fitness and nutrition. So I was still doing the post chat thing, and I stumbled onto one with a fitness expert and Olympic champion. So I was following his chat for a few weeks, and I loved everything. I loved all the information that he gave. So one day during the chat, he said that he was going to leave the chat scene, and all the people who were on the chat just, they're really disappointed hearing that. And one person ended up asking him if he had a website so that, they'd be able to continue to follow him. And his response is that he didn't have one and maybe he'd look for help. So, I was still kind of, high with that motivation from the Kelly Purdue thing and The Apprentice, the whole vibe. So I sense this to be just an incredible opportunity to land my first client. So, I had no clients at the time. I was looking for a way to break into consulting. So, I wanted to see if I could get this guy. But that said, I was terrified. I mean, this guy is he was a guru. Everybody loved him. He's never heard of me. I had zero credibility. I had no real experience that was worth talking about. I didn't have a product. I had no marketing material. Nothing. So the most money I ever made online was just selling old guitar equipment on eBay. You know, Everything else was just a failure, right? All the other stuff. So I had his email address, but I didn't know what to say. Um, but worse, I didn't really know how he'd respond. What if he tells me just go jump off a bridge or something? What if he told me that someone else already reached out to him, or what if he didn't respond at all? So I was like, screw it. I I just got up every ounce of willpower that was up at my disposal, and I just I put his email address in the to field of my Gmail account, and this is back in the day when Gmail, the only time, the only way to get one was to get invited, to have an invite. So and it was a personal Gmail account, right? So it wasn't even my own domain or anything. So um, then I was thinking about what am I going to say? I was since I'd studied copywriting too, on top of everything else, I was thinking about just sending him something like what John Carlton or Dan Kennedy would say, renegade type messages or something. But then I figured, you know what? I'm just gonna be honest and I'm just gonna speak from the heart. So when I created the email, I just said, I was a big fan of the chats. I got a lot of value from the advice, and I noticed that in his most recent chat session that he mentioned that he needed a website, and I was just wondering if we could talk about it. So, I was kind of scared. I wrote this out, didn't know it was going to happen, but, I just went ahead and clicked send. That same day, he actually replied with his phone number, and he said, call me. And the rest is history, really. That was my first client. So since then, I've had a lot more clients, and I ended up being successful enough. I've earned enough money to basically just allow me to travel around the world and be free. Um, and on one trip, we went to Fiji. Um, and this was actually our second trip to Fiji. The first time we went, it was just your typical just tropical escape to an island beach thing, right? But this second time around, we're taking our kids and we decided to do something a little more enriching, than just lounge on the beach. So one of the things we decided to do was to visit an orphanage, and this is really cool. Before we actually went to the orphanage, we took another thing we did was we took a cooking class, a Fijian cooking class, and Fijian cuisine is like it's a fusion of Indian cooking and with local ingredients like the fish and the local fruits and vegetables they have, and it was great. I've never cooked that kind of food, and it's pretty good. So what we decided was instead of just us just chowing down on what we cooked, why don't we just wrap it up and take it to the orphanage? So that's exactly what we did. So we did that. We also bought some groceries and brought some clothes that we can donate. So we went to the orphanage and we spent a couple of hours there, and we got to know that all the kids and the volunteers that work there, and they're just all of them were just such just fantastic, beautiful people, especially the kids, who they're just so full of life, full of joy. Even though they're orphans, they're just awesome kids, and they had great attitudes, and they're just extremely grateful, even for the food we gave them, for all the donations that we gave. But you know, even with that, they were even just more grateful that we came all the way from America just to take the time to spend with them. You know, because nobody really visits orphanages anymore. Um, so they were incredibly grateful for that. So towards the end of our visit, my son, who brought a soccer ball with him, he gave his ball to a kid named Isaac. And the look on Isaac's face, it was just absolutely priceless. He was just so incredibly grateful, and uh, you know, just thinking about that, it's our visit just um, it changed the world for these kids, and you know the smallest way, but it was just so positive for them, you know, and maybe it even changed Isaac's world, right? If only we gave him a ball, and maybe he just used that ball to just become a better soccer player or whatever. But I like to think that we changed his world too. And so the whole reason I created this course was that I'm hoping that by doing this cold emailing system, that it helps you reach your goals, your own financial and lifestyle goals. Um, and if it can get you to the income that you want when you actually reach those goals, um, I hope that you will find the money and the freedom to be able to find someone like Isaac for yourself and then change his world. And if we can just do that one at a time, the whole world changes. And for me, and hopefully for you, it all started with just one cold email. Okay? So with that, I hope that was a little bit inspirational for you, and let's just get cracking.